everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan, and today I'm going to show you how to replace an O2 sensor for a Toyota Highlander 3-liter V6 in the year 2002. This only really applies to the 3-liter, not the 3.3-liter, which is the same generation. But in 2004 or 5, I believe, they went to a 3.3-liter V6 that actually has 4 O2 sensors, where our vehicle today only has 2, so it's a little bit different, but they are pretty darn similar. So you could use this video if you had the 3.3-liter, but this is specific for the 3-liter, a little bit earlier model, which is kind of nice because it's a little bit easier. There's only 2 O2 sensors that could go bad, either bank 1 O2 sensor 1 or bank 2 O2 sensor 1, so that's pretty easy. This is a pretty simple and straightforward repair that basically anybody could do with 2 really basic tools. And all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into it. So I have my scanner hooked up to this Highlander here, and you can see that the code that came up is P0155. That's a generic code for an O2 sensor malfunction. But if you look closely, you can see that it says bank 2 sensor 1, and we can't navigate through any other code. So this is our only code. If it had 2 out, it would go to another one and it'd say bank 2 sensor 2 or something like that. So we know that bank 2 sensor 1 is our O2 sensor that's out, and it's the heater circuit, the little heater inside the O2 sensor, that's gone bad, but you have to replace the whole sensor anyway. So we can get started on that now that we know where to look. So here's our battery, pretty easy to find as soon as you open the hood. Then we're gonna grab a 10mm socket and remove the negative battery terminal first. Always remove the negative battery terminal first. There we go. Go ahead and spin that on a little bit so we don't lose it. And we can set that down in a way so it doesn't accidentally touch while we're working. So this is where our O2 sensor for bank 2 sensor 1 is located, just right there. There are only 2 O2 sensors on this vehicle, one located on our right bank and one located on our left, way over there, and down, almost touching the firewall. It's down there. For us, luckily, this is our guy here. This is the one we need to change. And I know you're probably watching this video because it's the other O2 sensor you need, and that's fair. I will show you exactly where that is later on in the video, but for now, we're gonna focus on bank 2 sensor 1. So there's bank 2 sensor 1, and what we're gonna do is grab some WD-40 or any other penetrating fluid, and make sure the exhaust is cool. Don't spray this on hot exhaust, and just spray some WD-40 right in that O2 sensor nut, because we want that to break loose. Now hose that down and let it soak. Let it sit there for at least 10 minutes. This O2 sensor keeps being the easy one because you can follow the wire right here. Comes up and it connects right here to the left of the air box, which is super easy and super cool. So we're gonna unplug this. Now some people like to just remove the O2 sensor and unplug it second. I'm kind of the other way around. I like to unplug it and then remove the O2 sensor. So you can push down on the safety here at the end of my left pointer finger. So there's a little tang down here in the safety, and just pry that up with a standard screwdriver. Oop. Like that. And tug on the connector, don't tug on the wire. So you can see where the safety was latching behind, just there at the end of my pointer finger. And you just lift it up and over and pull straight out. So the wire for the O2 sensor is actually through this little zip connector here. You can see it has 2 pairs of jaws. So the way you defeat these zip connectors is you just separate them, the top from the bottom, and then you can remove them. There we go. And you know what I'm going to do with this is not reuse it, because it's pretty crumbly, and a zip tie will work just as good, and I have a zillion of those. You can put it back on easily just by doing this, and it's back on, but this one is not in great shape, so I'm going to use a zip tie as a substitute. Now some people, because this is a bad O2 sensor, we know that from the code, they just snip this and then worry about the plug later so they can get the wrench on easier. I don't like doing that just because I think it's bad practice for when you're installing it, because you can just slide your 22mm wrench over the connector. So that's just personal preference, if I'm honest. And now you'll see why we used WD-40 or penetrating fluid earlier, because it's going to be a struggle to break loose. Like that. Typically you can just break them loose and then you can spin them off by hand. Like this one. How nice. And there we go. That is what our bad O2 sensor looks like. So we can go compare this to our new one. So here's our old O2 sensor we removed out of the vehicle. Here is our new one. There's our part number from Denso. Got this at the local AutoZone. Not very hard to find, although more expensive than I would have originally thought. And I've already taken it out of the bag to make sure it's the right one in the store. Always a good practice to be in. We can go ahead and stretch it out to make sure the lengths are identical. The O2 sensor itself looks identical, which it does, and most importantly, the plugs are identical, and these are. So we know that the one in my right hand is correct and can go back into our Highlander. But before we do that, we need to apply some anti-seize that comes with the O2 sensor. You want to put that right on your threads because let's say this bad boy goes out again, you want to be able to remove it, and you don't want to bust the threads inside of the exhaust there. So you don't need it too terribly much. I like to spread it around with my fingers just to see how much I'm actually getting on there, but don't go crazy, and certainly don't get any on the actual O2 sensor itself. So now I'm on the front of the vehicle looking at our exhaust manifold here, and we can go ahead and replace our O2 sensor by threading it in. Hand tight at first, and twirling your cord along with it as you tighten, because you don't want this cord to rip or shred or anything like that. And once we get it pretty snug with our fingers, we can grab our 22mm wrench again. So we can feed the connector through our 22mm wrench like we did before and snug it on up. Now, as far as the torque spec goes, pretty snug, I'll be honest with you. Pretty tight with your 22mm here. And that's because this is 22mm, it's pretty big, so it can handle a lot of force. But don't go crazy with it. You don't want to bust the threads out of the exhaust either. If I find a torque spec, I'll put it on screen. And you could use an O2 sensor socket with a torque wrench if you really wanted to, but honestly, just one arm tight should be good. I've taken my battery out. It's a completely unnecessary step. Just route it like you found it, like that, and then line it up so this little safety tab here is facing towards the right, that little safety tab there, and then just push it in until you hear that nice gratifying click sound. And like I said earlier, that little zip connector was a little brittle. I really felt like it was going to break, so I'm just going to use a standard black zip tie to secure that O2 wire so it's nice and away from the engine, using the transmission dipstick here. And then snip the tail off, but use one of these. Use a pair of flush cuts, because if you don't, use scissors or something, you'll create a very sharp surface on that zip tie head. But if you use a pair of flush cuts, it's nice and flush, and you don't risk injuring yourself. Now, the second O2 sensor located on the back of the engine is exactly the same, but in a different spot, so let's go check it out. All right, and that's all well and good for the front O2 sensor, but what about the back one? Well, we can go on the back of the engine here. You're gonna have to let the vehicle in the air, and we can see just before the catalytic converter, right on the exhaust manifold there, there is your bank 1 sensor 1, and you can see right there is your connector, and it works exactly the same way as the front O2 sensor. On later models they actually have 4 O2 sensors, but on these earlier ones they only have the 2. One on the left side of the engine like this one, and one on the right, or front to rear if you're looking directly straight on the vehicle. But if you have a bank 1 sensor 1 code, this is going to be your guy. That's what you're going to need to replace, and you're definitely going to need to get underneath it to do that. And then on your negative side, what we're going to do is just touch it to the terminal, and if it sparks out and gets crazy, lift it up. Because if it sparks out and gets crazy, it can potentially ignite the battery, because the battery is always venting gas. So you don't want it to spark out and get crazy. You want it to be nice and mellow like that was. And again, a 10mm here. And when you're tightening this, say you're using a wrench or something, make sure you never touch the two sides like this. Never do this, ever, ever, ever. Because if this touches this, you'll get sparks, you might get burnt. It is very, very dangerous. So now here comes the fun part, at least I think it's the fun part. We can go ahead and read our codes again and see that it has no fault codes. Once we change that O2 sensor, it automatically cleared it because I've started this vehicle, I had to move it. So the computer says, oh, hey, we don't have any more codes because that O2 sensor is now working properly. I like to just erase them anyway, just to be doubly sure. And our job is complete. So that's how to replace an O2 sensor in a 2002 Toyota Highlander V6 3-liter. It is really easy, really simple and straightforward, a great way to save money. But before I get into the cost breakdown and how much you're going to be saving, I want to go over that if you're doing this for a smog repair, so let's say you had a check engine light, you check the codes, it came up with this code, and now you're going to take it to the smog after you've just fixed it, don't do it just yet. Drive the car around for about 50 miles or so, because your computer's smart enough to know that when the codes were cleared recently. So if they've been cleared in about the last 50, or sometimes it's 100 miles, like on some German stuff's 100 miles. It's really tough to tell how many miles it would take for a monitor to reset. I like using 50 miles, it seems to work just right, because if you don't drive the car 50 miles, those monitors don't reset. The computer knows the codes have been cleared recently, and it'll just automatically fail you at a smog shop. So go ahead and drive the car about 50 miles or so to make sure those codes don't come back. Now for the fun part, getting on to the cost breakdown, I bought that O2 sensor for $140, I believe, which I thought was kind of pricey for an O2 sensor, but you get what you pay for, and we got the nice Denso unit there that's going to last for years and years and years, so that's something to consider. Here's another thing to consider. I actually looked up how much the dealer is going to charge you for that O2 sensor. It's $278.59, which is just absolutely insane to me. And then I looked up how much the labor they can charge you for that front O2 sensor. It's 1.4 hours, which that would take me nowhere near 1.4 hours. That would take 20 minutes at absolute most for the front O2 sensor. You don't even have to jack it up in the air. You can leave it on the ground for the front one. The rear one's the tricky one. And at that rate, the dealer's going to charge you about $100 bucks an hour. So 1.4 times 100 is 140. Keeps the math nice and easy. So 140 plus 278.59 is $418.59. So you're saving about $300 doing the work yourself. And honestly, over the lifetime of your vehicle, you doing these repairs that frankly anybody could do. You don't even have to get on the ground to get to the front one. It's super easy, super straightforward. You could buy an entire tool set, a good one, for $300 easily. I've left a link down below in the description to a decent tool set to get you started. And that's just the tip of the iceberg on money saving practices you can do while working on your vehicle. And you know the job's done correctly and you're using quality parts. Thank you so very much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you next time.